Hi, I'm Marlin. Welcome to my YouTube channel. If you've been watching my channel for a while, I always like to try different things and try building different instruments and stuff. And in this particular video, I tried to build a CB Gitty fiddle kit. And here it is, right here. Also, whether it's a fiddle or violin, you have to kind of take your pick. Take a look at that. This project was very challenging because I couldn't find any videos that showed you how to build one of these kits. So what I've done is I made a short video kind of showing you the steps I went through and also some of the pitfalls that I ran into. So watch the video, and at the end I'll show you a little bit more about this particular kit. So keep watching. The CB Gitty, the Americana box fiddle kit, was unboxed and the parts were all laid out and identified. The instruction manual has photos of the parts and has them labeled alphabetically. The parts of the fiddle body were dry fitted together, and then the side, front, and rear plates were glued together and clamped. However, the bottom panel and the top panel were not glued. The sound post was cut to 1 9/16 inches. A pencil and a ruler were used to draw a line between the two inward-facing points of the F-holes. And then the bridge was placed and centered near the line, and a small X was centered under each foot of the bridge post. The soundboard was then glued to the body and then clamped overnight. The bottom post was removed, and then the sound post and the bracing tone bar were glued into place. The bottom panel was glued and clamped into place and allowed to dry overnight. Glue was placed on the heel of the neck, and then it was inserted in a notch in the front and then clamped overnight. Painter tape was applied to the fretboard, and then the body and neck were stained with 3 coats of cherry wood finish. Six coats of true oil finish were applied to the body and the neck. Tailpiece peg was glued into the rear of the body using wood glue. Head reamer head tool was used to widen the tuner holes, and it's important to pay attention to the diagram to make sure that you ream these correctly. Also, if you ream too much, you may have trouble with the pegs being too loose when you install them, which is something that happened in this case, and I had to actually use some wood glue to make the holes smaller so that the pegs would
actually hold their position. The tuning pegs were placed in the headstock, and it was approximated where the strings would go. These were marked with a pencil, and then a 1/16 inch drill bit was used to make holes for the strings. The fine tuners were then installed into the tailpiece. The tailpiece attachment cord was fastened to the tailpiece using 2 brass nuts. The feet on the bridge were sanded flat, and then the bridge was placed against the fretboard and a line was drawn. Another line was drawn 1/8 of an inch above it, and then the bridge was trimmed down using a Dremel tool. The fiddle was strung using the diagrams that were provided in the assembly guide. Files were used to make notches for the strings on the bridge. Wooden shims had to be added on the feet of the bridge because apparently I cut the bridge a little too low. This is what the completed fiddle looks like.
In the video, I forgot to tell you how I mounted this. I basically had to drill a couple holes here, and this actually is tension mounted, where you actually have to tighten and loosen these things to get them to fit for this chin piece right here. Also, one of the things that was very tricky was stringing this. You have to kind of line the strings up a certain way for them to fit. And also, if you look at this bridge, okay, I had to actually cut too much off, and so I had to add some wood to shim it up. Also, I will point out that there were no notches here to line the strings up on, and I may at some point do some filing. But these knobs are extremely tricky because I made the mistake of taking off too much wood, and so I had to fill it with wood glue to get them to fit tightly. And even then, they're very tricky, and you have to use these fine tuners. The other thing I discovered about violins and fiddles is that they are completely different from guitars. The strings are tuned completely different from anything that I've encountered. This is a G string, this is a D string, this is an A string, and this is an E string. Their tune is perfect fifths. So that was quite different. Also, this thing is extremely difficult to keep in tune and somewhat frustrating. And then, of course, the other thing I discovered is that instead of using a pick like with a guitar, you use a bow, and you have to put resin on the bow, and then you get in a position like this, and you go like that. So I don't know how to play a violin. I freely admit that. And this was an interesting project, but somewhat frustrating. In fact, this is one of those projects that I didn't know if I'd ever actually get it completed. Hopefully, if you decide to undertake one of these projects, you can learn from the mistakes that I made and not make the same mistakes. Thanks for watching the video. Please hit the like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.